There are places in the world we were never meant to explore, depths so black that no light has ever touched them, pressures so intense that no human should survive. And yet, we keep going deeper. The Sarosh Institute was one of the most classified deep-sea research stations ever built. It sat 300 miles off the coast, hovering over the Mariana Trench, a place where few had ever set foot. Officially, it was a marine biology lab, a facility dedicated to studying life at the ocean's deepest points. But some say that wasn't the real reason it was built. Some say the institute wasn't searching for life. It was searching for something else, something that should have stayed buried. On November 14th, 2019, an incident was reported. One of the institute's divers, Malik Anwar, vanished during a routine maintenance dive. No distress signal, no signs of struggle. One moment, his team saw his flashlight cutting through the abyss. The next, he was gone. A full-scale search was launched. For hours, nothing. His radio was silent. His oxygen levels should have run out within 2 hours. Malik should have been dead. But then, 12 hours later, something surfaced. A body, floating alone in the waves, not a corpse. Malik, alive, breathing, and smiling. 12 hours, that's how long Malik Anwar was missing. 12 hours in the blackest depths of the ocean. 12 hours with no oxygen, no food, no heat, no chance of survival. And yet, somehow, he lived. When the rescue team pulled him from the water, they expected a corpse. Instead, they found something far more disturbing. Malik was alive, more than alive. He was calm, too calm. His breathing was slow, steady, as if he had just woken from a peaceful sleep. His pulse was perfect, no signs of shock, no signs of hypothermia. His body temperature was normal, despite spending 12 hours in freezing black water. It wasn't possible. The doctors rushed him into quarantine. His vitals were monitored. His blood work came back normal. There was nothing wrong with him. Except for one thing. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't answer questions, wouldn't even acknowledge the people around him. He just sat there, blinking, breathing. And then, finally, after hours of silence, he smiled. One of the doctors stepped closer. "Malik, can you hear me?" Malik's eyes moved, slowly, too slowly, like he was trying to remember how to be human. Finally, his lips parted, and he spoke his first words since being found. "I was not alone." The doctor's hand tightened around his clipboard. "What do you mean?" Malik tilted his head, his eyes. Something was wrong with his eyes. The pupils were too large, too dark, like they were still adjusting to a place with no light. Then he said something else. "It followed me up." The doctors exchanged glances. "What followed you?" Malik's smile widened, a slow, stretching grin, like he was remembering something he wasn't supposed to. Then he whispered, "It's still waiting." And he laughed. It wasn't the laugh of a man who had just been rescued. It was low, hollow, like the sound was pulling from somewhere deep inside him. The doctors called in security. They wanted answers. They wanted to know what happened in those 12 hours. But Malik wouldn't say another word, just that strange, knowing smile on his face, like he had brought something back with him, something that wasn't finished, something that was still down there, waiting. Malik wouldn't talk, wouldn't explain how he survived 12 hours in the abyss, wouldn't tell them what followed him up. But there was one last chance to find out, because before his disappearance, he had been wearing a helmet camera, and when the researchers recovered the footage, they realized that Malik's silence wasn't a choice. It was a warning. The video file was heavily corrupted. Glitches, distortion, like something had interfered with the signal. The tech team spent hours trying to restore it, and when they finally did, they wished they hadn't. The first 30 minutes looked normal. Malik's breathing was steady. His flashlight cut through the endless blue-black void. The ocean floor stretched beneath him, barren, lifeless, just rock and sand. The occasional pulse of bioluminescent creatures drifting by, nothing unusual, nothing threatening. And then, the light flickered. For a brief second, the footage warped. The timestamp glitched, jumped ahead by 30 seconds. When the image returned, Malik was no longer alone. Something was moving beneath him, something massive. But it wasn't swimming, it was watching. A shadow, not shaped like any known sea creature. It had no fins, no tail, no limbs, just a presence. A dark mass that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Malik's breathing hitched, his flashlight beam wavered. And then, the ocean spoke. A noise cut through the static. Not whale song, not sonar, not anything recorded in marine science. It was low, rhythmic. A voice, speaking in Malik's own language. The words were garbled, but one phrase was clear. "You were not meant to be this deep." Malik's breathing spiked. "You should not have come." He turned, swung his flashlight wildly. But there was nothing, just the massive, shifting shape in the distance. And then, it moved. The shadow began to rise. Malik turned his camera toward the station's comms. His voice came through the radio. "I see something. Do you copy?" Silence. "This is Malik. Do you copy?" More silence. Then, the station finally responded. But it wasn't his team. It was his own voice. "Malik." His own voice. Distorted, warped, echoed through the comms. "You see it now." The real Malik froze. His hands shook. "Who is this? Come closer. Who is this?" The ocean rumbled. The pressure gauges spiked. And then, the shadow opened its eyes. There were no pupils, no irises, just two massive hollow voids staring through Malik's visor. His breathing collapsed into static. The camera shook violently. Then, the screen cut to black. That was the last image the Sarosh Institute ever recovered. When the video resumed, Malik was gone. Just open ocean, just silence. And then, 12 hours later, he resurfaced. The recording should have ended. But deep in the corrupted data, there was one last sound, a whisper. Malik's voice, but stretched, deeper. "I was not alone." And then, something else, another voice. "Not alone. Never alone." Then, static. End of recording. No one knows. No one understands how he survived, or why he was let go, or if he was let go at all, because Malik wasn't the same when he returned. And some say, whatever was waiting in the deep never stopped watching. The footage was incomplete, corrupted, glitching, but the audio survived. And what it revealed was worse than anything the camera had captured. At first, it sounded like ocean noise, the distant hum of deep-sea pressure. Then, a faint clicking sound, rhythmic, like something was communicating. Then, a whisper, not static, not interference. A voice, speaking in Malik's own language. But it wasn't his team, and it wasn't human. "You were not meant to be this deep." Malik's breathing spiked. "You should not have come." A faint scraping noise, like something moving against metal. Then silence. Then a single phrase. "But now, you can never leave." The researchers stared at each other. None of them spoke. Finally, one of them exhaled. "Play it again." They listened, word for word, every sound. Then, something changed. A glitch. A section of audio they hadn't heard the first time. A voice, overlapping with Malik's, distorted, low, wrong. A phrase that sent a cold wave of dread through the room. I hear you. One of the technicians ripped off his headphones. What the hell was that? No one had an answer, but the sound, the way it said it wasn't just speaking, it was responding, like it knew they were listening, like it had been waiting. Then, the final words, Malik's own voice, but deeper, stretched, like it had been repeated back to him from somewhere else. I was not alone. Then, silence. What did he hear? The Sarosh Institute never released the recording. It was classified, locked away. Some say it was destroyed. Others say it was sent to someone who already knew what was down there. Because whatever spoke to Malik, whatever followed him up, it was still waiting. Malik Anwar was alive, but he wasn't the same. Something had changed. Not just his mind, not just his body. Something deeper, something the doctors couldn't explain. For the first few days after his rescue, Malik was kept in quarantine. His vitals were perfect. His body showed no signs of damage, no oxygen deprivation, no decompression sickness. His heart rate was steady, too steady, like he was in some kind of unnatural stasis, like his body was still adjusting to a place he no longer belonged. The first sign of change. Malik stopped blinking. Hours would pass, and his eyes would remain open, unmoving, unblinking, just staring at the ceiling, at the walls, at nothing. The doctors ran neurological tests, checked his brain activity. It was unusual. At first, the readings were normal. Then, they changed. Patterns they had never seen before. Brain waves that shouldn't exist. And then, they heard it. Malik, whispering, speaking in a language no one recognized. Soft, rhythmic, repeating something over and over, words that sounded like the ocean itself. The incident in the hospital room. On the 6th night, a nurse entered Malik's room. She checked his vitals, wrote down his readings. Then she reached for his wrist to check his pulse. And that's when he grabbed her, not in a panic, not in fear, with purpose. She tried to pull away, but Malik's grip was too strong. His nails dug into her skin, and then he spoke, for the first time in days, a whisper. Software deliberate. It's still waiting down there. The nurse's breath hitched. She tried to respond. Then, Malik tightened his grip. And it knows I survived. The monitor alarm started blaring. The staff rushed in, pried Malik's fingers off her arm, pulled the nurse away. By the time they turned back, Malik was smiling. Just smiling, like he had just shared a secret. One only he and the deep could understand. The final night hours later, Malik was gone. The security footage showed everything. At 2:37 a.m., his hospital bed was empty. The door unlocked from the inside. Malik had simply walked out. His footprints were wet, leaving damp trails down the hallway, as if he had just stepped out of the ocean. The cameras caught his final moments. He walked to the emergency exit, paused, turned toward the camera, and smiled. Then, he whispered something. No sound, just his lips moving. And then, he was gone. Into the night. Into nothing. Where is Malik now? No one knows. There was no sign of him. No tracks outside the hospital. No footage of him leaving the property. It was as if he had walked straight back into the ocean. Some say he was never supposed to return, that whatever let him go changed its mind. Others believe Malik was never truly himself after that dive, that the man who resurfaced wasn't Malik at all, that he was just a shell, a warning, a message from something deeper, something that is still waiting. The final words of the deep. The Sarosh Institute never released the dive footage, never acknowledged what happened to Malik, never spoke of what they were really studying in those waters. But there's one thing we do know. Malik left a final note in his hospital room. A single sentence, scrawled in shaky, dripping ink. Words that shouldn't exist. Words that weren't entirely human. The ocean does not forget.